Dr. Nandipha Magudumana isn't giving up without a fight. Her legal team seeking to set aside the judgment dismissing her application to have her arrest and deportation from Tanzania declared unlawful. But Magudumana claims that she was abducted by the South African Police Service in Tanzania. Now, in June, the court dismissed her court bid with costs, saying she agreed to be extradited. eNCA senior reporter Silindelo Masikane is following that story and joins me now for the very latest. Lee, take us through what other developments, of course, around this case and appeal by Dr. Magudumana. All right, we've lost Silindelo Masikane, but still to come, Russia Newslink will continue to unpack the implications of the court ruling that could land former President Jacob Zuma back in court.
Hi, Alton, it's Lee. Can you hear me?
Okay, let me unmute. Can you hear me?
Hello. Hi, Alton. Yes, I can hear you now.
Can you hear me?
Be with you in a second. Yeah, bo.
100%.
Ask him to what? Oh, please tilt down, Alton.
Is it good?
Happiness. Yeah, bo. Thank you.
Welcome back. Now, Dr. Nandipha Magudumana isn't giving up without a fight. Her legal team is seeking to set aside the judgment, dismissing her application to have her arrest and deportation from Tanzania declared unlawful. Magudumana claims she was abducted by the South African Police Service in Tanzania. Now, in June, the court dismissed her court bid with costs, saying she had agreed to be extradited. eNCA senior reporter Silindelo Masikane is following that story for us, and she joins us live now to give us this update. Good morning to you, Slee. What are the very latest developments surrounding this case?
Well, Dumelo, we find ourselves back in the Free State High Court, where we are expecting to hear the appeal application by Dr. Nandipha Magudumana's legal team. You would remember that back in June, we had heard arguments as well as the judgment in this very courtroom that dismissed her application, saying that first it wasn't urgent, but that Dr. Nandipha had essentially agreed to come back to South Africa, so she can't now come and launch an application to find issue with how she was brought back into the country. However, her legal team believes that another court could come to a different conclusion, and so they are back to argue, in essence, before the same judge to say that a different court may find in her favor. But to unpack this for us, because of course I don't know much about the law, I am joined by legal expert Mr. Alton Hart from the UJ Law Clinic. Thank you so much for your time once more this morning, Mr. Hart. Maybe then just unpack for me in terms of what we can expect in arguments from Dr. Nandipha's legal team in terms of them trying to convince the judge that the Supreme Court of Appeal could come to a different conclusion.
Now, obviously, if they're before the same judge, Judge Loubser, then obviously they need to just say to them and put before court to say that they think that the court misinterpreted or was misplaced in the law, and that they believe that another court will come to a different judgment. Because here it's questions of law, how the law is interpreted, and for me that already opens the door, because two legal practitioners never think the same about how it is. And if one looks at it, he made a fact finding to say that this was a disguised extradition. So by the mere fact that finding was made that it was a disguised extradition, then one needs to look at consent, and then one looks at what type of consent is needed when you actually deal in terms of international law with extraditions. And then the mere assertion that is in the South African case law pertaining to the two cases from the former Ciskei, Transkei regions, it doesn't speak, because those cases were decided pre our constitution being enacted, our final constitution, and then it's something different, it's a whole different. So I think the reasons that she can put before court, there's sufficient to put reason before court to say that a different court will interpret the law differently.
Talk to me then about how how far Dr. Magudumana can take this application. Let's say, for argument's sake, the eNCA agrees with the High Court ruling. Could she take it as far as the Constitutional Court?
No, indeed. So she can take it to the Constitutional Court. Here we talk about specifically her rights as a person. She alleges that her rights as a person has been violated, so which means there's a constitutional element to it. So if the eNCA doesn't give her or rule in her favor, she can still approach the Constitutional Court to say, listen, yeah, I think how the eNCA, how the High Court has interpreted the law was not correct, and I want you guys to actually look at the decision and maybe come to a different ruling. But that road is open for her.
Lastly then, let's canvass how this application affects the processes in the Magistrates Court. We are expecting all 12 suspects back in court on the 8th of August. A possible postponement, but moving forward, how will this application in terms of Magudumana trying to set aside legal proceedings as well as her arrest affect possibly the start of the trial in terms of that main matter around the escape?
Now, obviously, it will have bearing on the trial, but if the court now grants her leave to appeal the decision of the High Court that said she gave consent and she wanted to be brought back to South Africa and that consent was sufficient, if the Supreme Court of Appeal grants her that leave to appeal, then obviously there will be a part B to this application where they actually have to look at the actual law and come to a decision as to was the consent that was given, or alleged consent that was given, was it sufficient in terms of extradition law and international law standards. And if the court says, okay, no, that was not enough, then it will mean that she would be removed as an accused person, but it will not stop the actual hearing of the other 11, including Thabo Bester in the interim. But it will have a bearing, but obviously it will mean that she will be removed as an accused, but at the later stage she can be added again as an accused person if they now follow correct procedures to arrest her and bring her before court for cases that she is alleged to be involved in, an accused person in.
Thank you so much for your time this morning. That is legal expert Mr. Alton Hart from the UJ Law Clinic. As you can see behind me, Dumelo, the courtroom is actually abuzz now with the legal teams, in fact, coming inside court. We are expecting to start at just around 9:30 this morning, in fact. That is the confirmation we received from the registrar. You can see that Magudumana's legal team is actually here. They're setting up. Advocate Machino Mtlowung, who of course is leading that legal team, and I do see that the judge's registrar is also getting the desk ready for the judge to be able to walk in at around 9:30, and that is when we are expecting this application to be heard.
All right, well, thank you so much, Slee. We'll be sure to cross back to you, colleague, as soon as those court proceedings begin. As we know, Dr. Nandipha not giving up without a fight. The legal team, rather, at this point, looking to set aside the judgment dismissing her application to have her arrest and deportation from Tanzania declared unlawful. For us, eNCA senior reporter Silindelo Masikane.